Wicked Science Season 1 Review. Hello and welcome to the Season 1 of Wicked Science Review. And yes, I know I've done a video on this before, but that was more of a general overview of the series, whereas this is more of an actual review of the first season. And no, I'm not going to review every single episode because it's 26 episodes, so we'd be here all night. But I'm just going to take a look at a few of the more notable episodes, either ones that I particularly liked, or ones that made me want to throw something at the screen. Episode 1 is a very entertaining pilot. I could have lived without this TV budget CGI dinosaur, but the characters are quite compelling, particularly Elizabeth. And yes, I know I'm deeply biased because I have a thing for Bridget Nafal. Well, tough, deal with it. Like I said in the overview, I'm appalled at how awfully Elizabeth is treated in that first episode. I mean, pre-Genius, she's so painful to watch. Introverted and shy and socially awkward, with everything from the way she dresses and carries herself with her stooped posture and hunched shoulders, just speaking volumes, and you can practically see her flinch every time she gets some cruel jibe chucked her way or is casually dismissed. It's particularly painful when Dina, the hot new girl who just strolls in, just casually steals the seat that she sits in next to Toby, who she obviously has a crush on. The way she kind of says, almost uncomprehendingly, "I sit next to Toby." And you can see how that brief social interaction with him, that means nothing to him clearly, is probably the highlight of her week. It's quite painful. After the accident, and she's turned into a genius, she's much more confident. But you can certainly understand how that seething anger that must have been boiling under the surface for years at how she's been treated, finally being given the chance to be expressed. As for the other characters, Toby is likeable enough, and is at least depicted as being more kind of indifferent to Elizabeth than outright nasty. But oh my god, some of the other characters are awful. I will say it now and say it proud. I freaking hate Dina. I can't stand her. She's almost kind of portrayed as supposedly being this kind of cute, girly girl next door type. But she's not. She's actually a nasty piece of work. She's a really manipulative bitch. And you can see this from episode 1, because she's an absolute bitch to Elizabeth from moment 1 for absolutely no reason. And this is, pre-accident Elizabeth, who can barely look anybody in the eye and barely say anything to anybody. And she's a complete bitch to her for no freaking reason whatsoever. To me, how you treat somebody who is clearly lower down on the social pecking order, that's an indication of the kind of person you are. And if that's the case, Dina is an A-grade freaking bitch, I'm sorry. I don't blame Elizabeth for hating her guts. The most uncomfortable thing about this is it's really unclear throughout the whole season whether the show realizes how awful Elizabeth has been treated, clearly, and how awful Dina is. It's really difficult because she never kind of gets a comeuppance. There are many moments in season 1 where she really goes too far. I mean, she actually physically assaults Elizabeth on at least 2 occasions. And, nobody says a word to her. And if Elizabeth strikes back, she's the bad guy. What? There's something a little bit iffy about that. I still can't work out whether the show actually expects us to like Dina or not, but I freaking hate her. The next episode I want to talk about is episode 6, which is, I think, the jungle in the laboratory. This is a really fun episode. Elizabeth and Dina's latest outbreak of hostilities. Seriously, since episode 1, the episode seemed to be more about how much Elizabeth and Dina hate each other, and Toby's just trying to limit the fallout, rather than, even though Toby's supposed to be like the main character. I find that kind of amusing. Toby's attempts to fix Elizabeth's damage to Dina's hair causes a disaster that threatens to expose their shared secret. This is a fun episode that's made all the better by the interaction, the amount of interaction between Toby and Elizabeth, which is bizarrely the first time they've really had shared screen time since the first episode. I find it weird that it kind of took the program makers so long to twig that the show's really so much more compelling when these two are front and center with each other. I mean, I don't really care whether they're, being friendly or being nasty to each other. They're just much more interesting when they're together. That's just my opinion anyway. But yeah, this is a really fun episode. Elizabeth comes across as a lot less angry and a lot less kind of aggro when she's actually interacting with Toby. And Toby actually seems really enthusiastic by them working together. There's even a sweet, if slightly awkward moment when Toby makes a crack about lots of people wishing she was dead, to which she goes very quiet and asks, "Even you?" And he gets really uncomfortable before replying, "I didn't say that." He seems almost shy in the way he says that. He's never actually seemed to hate her, but this scene is the first time we get the impression he might actually have some kind of affection for her. Of course, he then rather spoils it by pretending that they hadn't just been getting along when his friends show up. Yeah, that'll help her with her anger issues, won't it? The next episode I want to talk about is the one where Toby builds a robot double for Dina so that he can cover her shift at work while she goes on a date. Now, that's actually a really, really funny comedy episode. Though I must admit, Toby doing this to allow a girl he fancies, quite obviously fancies, to go out with somebody else is just cucked almost beyond belief. I mean, seriously, dude, that is so lame. However, the episode I really want to talk about, mainly because it really pissed me off, is the one with the school dance and the pheromones. Toby is so disappointed by his romantic strikeouts that he comes up with a way to attract girls with pheromones, only to realise how dodgy an idea that is by the way Dina reacts to it. However, they then get stolen by idiot bully Garth and released into the air conditioning at the school dance. Now, this is an interesting episode, not least because all the chaos in this episode is ultimately Toby's fault. Elizabeth isn't doing anything. She's doing nothing more than organising the dance, and in a rather amusing Monica Geller-esque manner. I love the way she tells these two bored students, "Start having fun now." Although she's initially cheesed off by the way the dance turns to chaos, she's actually quite impressed when she realises that it's all Toby's fault. Unfortunately, and this is what really, really drove me crazy when I watched this episode ends with another, even more horrendous reminder of why we should all hate Dina's guts. Despite seemingly having no interest in Toby romantically, I mean, she likes to flutter her eyelashes at him to keep him in line occasionally, but she has clearly friend-zoned him permanently. She seems to fly into a jealous rage just at the sight of Elizabeth and Toby having a quiet, private conversation, barges in and starts loudly verbally abusing her, and then graduates to a full-on physical assault. Wait, what? Like I said, I am really baffled as to whether the show actually expects us to like Dina, because at this point, I wouldn't blame Elizabeth for freaking killing this bitch. What the hell is wrong with her? I reiterate, Elizabeth does nothing wrong in this episode and ends up getting physically assaulted and humiliated just for talking to the guy that she actually does like, as opposed to keeping around like a pet Dina. I mean, seriously, what the hell? And I think what irritated me even more is that although Toby is clearly unimpressed by Dina's actions, he doesn't really castigate her for it. And he really should have, because that's just... what the hell? I mean, certainly at this point, it's very difficult to blame Elizabeth for being so freaking angry and hating these people so much. Who can blame her? She does nothing wrong in the entire episode. Gets assaulted and humiliated in front of the entire school for doing nothing other than talking to someone. Holy crap. The next episode I want to talk about is one of my favourite episodes of the season. I think it's called Vigilance. After she nearly gets caught using the school's science lab at night, something that could get her expelled, Elizabeth tries to persuade Toby to let her use his home laboratory and even join in with her new project. Of course, as per usual, she gets rebuffed, so she resorts again to using the school lab, not knowing that the teachers have placed a hidden camera in the room to catch the persistent intruder. Now, this was a really good episode, and I was really surprised by how strongly they kind of hit on the Toby Elizabeth thing, which is not something that really materializes in full till season 2. But it's really quite strong here. He finally gets off that fence that he likes to sit on in regards to her, and he takes direct action to stop her from being expelled, much to his friend's disbelief. And I love how shocked and furious Dina is by him siding with Elizabeth and acting on her behalf. I was just like, suck it up, bitch. This was a great episode. There's not much in the sense of the sci-fi wackiness, but there's a lot of character stuff, and that's kind of what interests me mostly anyway. I really liked Toby being forced to kind of show that he cares about Elizabeth more than he wants to admit. I like how happy Elizabeth is at the end, to the point she's even being kind of nice and sweet to Verity when she normally just yells at her. And I really liked seeing the smug smirk being well and truly wiped off Dina's face. I loved this episode. Unfortunately, the next episode is a big disappointment and basically backtracks on everything we just did. Dina provokes Elizabeth again, and her retaliation unfortunately goes wildly out of control and actually becomes life-threatening to Dina. What a great pity it didn't actually kill her. And even though that clearly wasn't Elizabeth's intention, it's enough to make Toby flip his lid and really shove her away. And oh man, that scene is actually quite painful. He tells her that she's sick and that he's never going to like her. It's really quite painful, and you don't really blame Elizabeth for being so hurt and so angry. Unfortunately, this is also kind of where the season takes a downturn, because from this point on, up until like maybe the last few episodes, there's almost no interaction between Toby and Elizabeth. And to me, like I said, I don't care whether they're getting along or whether they're at each other's throats. They're just much more interesting when they're on screen doing things together. And I kind of felt that they just kind of lost. They lost Elizabeth for a while. They kind of lost. Perhaps it's removing Toby from that equation to a degree, but they just kind of made it a bit too one note after this episode, and I thought that was disappointing. So I wasn't overly keen on much of the last half of season 1. Up until the last 4 episodes, I thought that episodes 23, 24, 25, and 26 were a big improvement on the previous bunch of episodes, because the stakes get really high and the chips are well and truly down. Toby finally figures out exactly how he and Elizabeth were turned into geniuses and how to reverse it, and he intends to do just that to Elizabeth. But when his trap fails and Elizabeth realizes what he was trying to do to her, she goes to some pretty extreme lengths to get hold of that same information. Now, those 4 episodes were actually really good, and they could almost have worked as a series finale rather than a season 1, albeit with a slightly open end, because it really hits the fan all over the place. Elizabeth is completely out of control at this point, though in a way, again, I kind of sympathize. I mean, I don't know whether it's just because I'm sweet on Bridget Novell. But again, I kind of don't blame her for being so well and truly cheesed off. What right does Toby actually have to do this to her? He's basically trying to take away the one thing she thinks she has going for her without her consent. I don't really blame her for being extremely angry and extremely cheesed off. One thing I found very interesting in one of the last episodes was Toby's admission to his friends that the genius flashes that he and Elizabeth get are almost like a compulsion. Like whatever idea he gets, he has to create or build it, even if it's crazy. I'm not sure that's really been made clear before, but it makes a lot of sense, both in terms of why Toby is so wary of his abilities and would be happy to get rid of it, but also for Elizabeth. I mean, Toby has done stupid things because of it, and even though he's a little immature, he's relatively well balanced most of the time. Elizabeth was clearly very troubled and very unhappy, and dealing with some serious anger issues even before this happened to her, so it makes it even more understandable why she's so out of control with it. I found that really psychologically fascinating, the idea that it's almost like them having to have their fix from a drug or something. Though you might think that Toby would be a little bit more understanding of Elizabeth as a result, given he knows what it's like. But then, like I said, a little bit immature. But yeah, the last 4 episodes were very enjoyable and do some pretty extreme things. And kind of redeemed, in a way, the disappointment that I felt in a lot of the second half of the season. And it's a shame, because I really did like the first half of the season, and I really liked the characters, and I really liked where they were starting to go. It just kind of seemed to me that from episode 13, they kind of backtracked on where they were going to go, and it just kind of got a bit Like I said, the last 4 episodes certainly redeemed that and were very good. I have to say, I've only just started re-watching season 2 for the first time in 15 years. I do remember liking season 2 more, and from what I've seen so far, that's probably going to be the case again. However, I still liked season 1 for the most part, and I give it a very strong B